Add a pop of color to your wardrobe with this vibrant crochet rainbow tank top. It is made with soft breathable yarn and features the stunning V-stitch, making it the perfect project for music festivals, pride events, or even just a casual summer wear. Hey friends, my name is Shaz and today we'll be making this fun crochet tank top using the V-stitch. You'll learn how to change yarn colors effortlessly without any loose ends and how to work increases with your V-stitch. Now let's get started. For today's project, we'll be using Cascade Fixation yarns, and I have chosen the color red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple in this order. I'm also using a 4.5mm crochet hook. To start off, we'll be working from the top down, and we'll be working on one side of the straps first. I'm making a size small, and to start, I'll be working up 10 chains. I'll chain once more to start the next row. And into the second chain from your hook, we'll be working a double crochet stitch. For our next stitch, we'll go straight into working the V-stitch. From our last stitch, we'll skip 2 chains, and into the third chain, you'll insert your hook and work 1 double crochet stitch. You'll chain 1 and work another double crochet stitch into the same chain space. This will be your first V-stitch. Now let's do that again. We'll skip 2 chains, and into the third chain you'll work a double crochet stitch, chain 1, and work another double crochet stitch into the same chain space. This will be our second V-stitch. Next, to close up the row, you'll skip 2 stitches, and into that last stitch you'll work 1 double crochet stitch. This completes our first row. To start the next row, you'll chain 1 and turn your work. For the next row, we'll be working increases only on one side of the strap. So for the first stitch, we'll work an increase V-stitch by working a double crochet stitch, chain 1, double crochet stitch into the same stitch. Now, into the chain space that we made earlier, we'll go ahead and work our V-stitch. We will double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet into the same chain space. We'll do this one more time. And into the last stitch, which is a double crochet stitch, we'll just work 1 double crochet stitch. Before closing up that stitch, let's go ahead and prepare our next color. I'll snip off my red yarn. Now for this pattern, we'll be working 1 color for every 2 rows. Now with our new yarn color, in this case, we have the orange yarn. You'll pull through your new yarn and you'll chain 1 to secure. You'll turn your work. Now, in order to tidy up our work so we don't have too many ends to weave, we'll pick up the 2 loose ends and work our first double crochet stitch while working around the excess tail. For the next row on this side, we will not be working any increases. We'll just use this foundation chain's tail as our marker to when we will start our increases. So go ahead and continue working the V-stitch into every chain space all the way across. Now once you've completed this row, don't forget to tug on the excess tail before snipping it off. And once you're at that last stitch, go ahead and work one double crochet stitch, as this will not be an increase row. Chain 1 and turn your work. For the next row, we'll be working another increase stitch. So go ahead and work the V stitch into that first stitch. For this excess tail, just go ahead and snip it off. So once you've worked your increase stitch, you'll just continue working your V stitches into every chain space. On our last stitch, we'll need to change yarn colors. So before closing up the double crochet stitch, you'll just snip off the orange yarn. Make sure to leave a long tail so that it makes it easier to bring forward later on. You'll take your yellow yarn, you'll pull through and chain 1 to secure. Now we'll just be repeating what we did on the last 2 rows. We'll pick up the excess yarn and work 1 double crochet stitch into that first stitch. And because we're on this side of the row, we will not be working on any increases. The increase stitch will always be on the second row of every color. Next, we'll work our V stitch into every chain space while working around the excess tail, and we'll do this all the way across. Once you've reached that last stitch, you'll work a double crochet stitch. You'll chain 1 and turn your work. Now I'll just snip this off. Now always remember the end with that red tail pointing out, that will be my reference to start my increase stitch. So I'll work my increase stitch into that first stitch and work my remaining V stitch into every chain space. Now you'll continue to work on the same pattern as we did on the last 2 rows by switching to your new yarn color on your last row, followed by a regular V stitch row, and you'll work an increase on the following row. So basically you're only doing an increase stitch on every other row. And you'll be following the sequence of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, and you'll continue increasing on one side until you've reached the length of your neckline. In this case, I'm working a size small, and I'll be working a total of 17 rows. So I've just completed 17 rows, which is the length of my neckline. Now on my next row, which will still be on the yellow colored yarn, on the next row, I will not be working an increase on the second row. So I'll chain 1, I'll turn my work. Now typically I'll be working an increase on this side, but I'll stop doing my increases by working a double crochet stitch. And I'll go straight into working a V stitch into the chain space, and I'll do this all the way across. Now that I'm at my last stitch, instead of working a double crochet stitch, I'll be working an increase V stitch. This increase stitch will be for the underarm portion. I'll chain 1 to secure and bind off. Now let's go ahead and make a second piece following the exact same steps as we did on this strap. Once you've completed making your second strap, on your last stitch we'll be switching to our next yarn color. So go ahead and work on your increase V-stitch into that last stitch. And we'll prepare to change yarn colors. In this case, I'll be switching to the green yarn. You'll draw up a loop, chain 1 to secure, and go ahead and snip off the previous yarn. I'll turn my work, and now from this row, we'll be working on the underarm portion. So for this underarm portion, we'll be working increases on every row on the opposite side of the neckline. So into that first stitch, we'll work a V-stitch. And you'll continue to work the V-stitch into every chain space all the way across. Now we'll be joining both pieces together. On your last stitch, we'll be joining the first double crochet stitch on both sides. For this pattern, there is no right side or wrong side, so it's fine to turn both panels with the V increase side placed in the middle. So on that last stitch, you'll work a double crochet, you'll chain 1, and you'll take the second piece and work another double crochet into that first stitch. So this will join both pieces together. On your next stitch, you'll find the chain space and continue to work the V stitch pattern all the way across. Once you've reached that last stitch, we'll go ahead and work an increase stitch by working a V stitch into that last stitch. You'll chain 1 and turn your work. If you need to switch yarn colors, go ahead and do so. Now, into that first stitch, we'll work another V stitch increase. And for the next stitch, we'll work another V stitch into that first chain space. Like so. And then from here, we'll just continue working the V stitch into every chain space all the way across. Once we've reached the middle of the row, we'll be working our V stitch on top of that chain that joined both of the pieces together. Like this. And then from here, you'll just work your V stitch into every chain space. And once you've reached that last row, you'll work a V stitch into that last chain space and work an increased V stitch on top of that last double crochet stitch. And because I'll need to switch yarn colors, I won't complete that last stitch. I'll go ahead and pick up my blue yarn. I'll pull through to close up the loop. I'll chain 1 and turn my work. And just like the last row, we'll be working an increase on the first and last stitch on every row. You'll continue to increase until you've reached the width of half your chest circumference. So I've just completed 6 rows of increased stitches on both sides. This is about 17 inches or 43 centimeters in width. For the armhole and underarm portion, it is on the larger side, So go ahead and adjust accordingly if you do not want it to be too wide. Now for the next row, we will not be doing any more increases. So here I have my last stitch, which I'll need to change to the next yarn color. I'll pick up my red yarn and pull through that last stitch to close up the row. I'll chain one, I'll turn my work. Now just like how we worked on the side of the straps, you'll pick up the excess tail and you'll only work a double crochet stitch into that first stitch. Now into the chain space, you'll go ahead and work your V stitches into every chain space all the way across. On your last stitch, you'll work the V stitch into the last chain space, and on that last stitch, you'll work a double crochet stitch. Chain one, turn your work, and you'll just continue the same stitch as you did on the previous row by working a double crochet stitch followed by a V stitch into every chain space. And once you've reached that last stitch, you'll just work a double crochet stitch and switch to the next yarn color. You'll continue to work the same number of stitches until you've reached the total length for your size. I worked a total of 33 rows, which is about 22 inches or 56 centimeters in total length. And once you're done, this is how the front panel should look like. Now let's go ahead and work on the back panel. We'll just be repeating exactly what we did on the front side minus a few rows. For the back panel, you'll work the same pattern as you did on the front side minus 4 rows. You'll go ahead and make a second piece. And once you've completed both straps, we'll be attaching them together by working 9 chains. This is applicable for all sizes. Once you've completed all 8 chains, you'll slip stitch into that first stitch, making sure that the increase side is in the middle. You'll slip stitch into that first stitch. You'll chain one to secure and bind off. Now we'll insert a hook into the corner of any of the sides. We'll draw up a loop. We'll chain one to secure, and we'll work a double crochet stitch into that first stitch. For this row, we will not be doing any increases for a total of 4 rows. So you'll continue working the V stitch into every chain space all the way across. And I'll meet you back here once we've reached the chains. Once you've reached that last stitch and you're at the beginning of the chains, you'll work a V stitch on top of that last double crochet stitch. Next, you'll skip 2 chains, and into the third chain, you'll work a V stitch. You'll skip another 2 chains and work a V stitch. And your next V stitch should be on top of that first double crochet stitch on the other strap. Now you'll continue to work the V stitch into every chain space all the way across. On that last stitch, just work one double crochet stitch, and if you need to change yarn colors, go ahead and do so before closing up that last stitch. You'll chain one, turn your work, and repeat what we did on the last row. So we'll be working a double crochet stitch into that first stitch and working the V-stitch into every chain space, and you'll repeat this row for 4 more rows. Once you've completed that last 4th row, the next row should be your increased underarm row. So I'll go ahead and work on my last stitch. I'll snip off this last yarn and pick up my new yarn color. I'll draw up a loop, I'll chain one to secure and turn my work. Just like how we did on the front panel, we'll be working an increase into that first double crochet stitch. So here I'll be working a V-stitch into the first stitch, and I'll be working V-stitches into the following V-stitches all the way across. And once I'm at my last stitch, I'll go ahead and work another V-stitch. I'll chain one, I'll turn my work, and I'll continue increasing the same number of rows as I did on the front panel. Once you've completed your underarm increase portion, you'll just go ahead and work even number of stitches, just like how you did on the front panel, until you've reached the same length as the front. And once completed, this is how your back panel should look like. Do not bind off just yet. We'll use that last stitch to seam up the sides. Now go ahead and place the front panel on top of the back panel. And because there's no right side or wrong side for this pattern, go ahead and find the best side and place it on the inner side. Now from your last stitch, you'll pick up your hook and you'll insert your hook into that first stitch on both pieces. Typically, I would use a stitch marker to secure and align both pieces, but because we have the colored stripe, I'm using that as my reference point. So you insert your hook into both of the first stitch and you'll work a single crochet. You'll continue to work single crochet stitches into every stitch while using the colored row to align both pieces together. Here I have distributed 3 single crochet stitches for every color. You'll do this all the way across until you've reached the top of the underarm row. Once you've completed all your stitches all the way to the top, you'll just work a chain 1 to secure and bind off. Now you'll turn your work to the other side and seam up the other side. This time we'll be working from the top. You'll insert your hook right where the increased row ends. You'll drop a loop, you'll chain 1 to secure. And from here, you'll just work your single crochet stitches into both pieces all the way down. Once you've reached that last stitch, you'll just chain 1 to secure and bind off. Now we'll be sewing up the straps. For the straps, I'll be using the red yarn just to match the first row. I'll insert my hook into the first stitch of both pieces. I'll drop a loop and I'll chain one to secure. Now I'll insert my hook into every chain space and every stitch on both pieces all the way across while working around the excess tail. On your last stitch, you'll chain one to secure and you'll bind off. Now one final step left is to seam the other strap. You'll do the exact same thing on the other side. And once you're done, go ahead and weave in all loose ends and you're done. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if it was, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. I'll see you on my next video. Bye for now!